Okay, cool.
th- th- So I'm actually curious on what was the spark that caused you into the like the hi-fi.
Yeah. So I've always been into hi-fi from a young age. And I watched a lot of YouTube reviews. And I had this funny story, if you got a second. So I don't know if you're familiar with the little Star Wars characters and GI Joe characters,
Yeah.
the toys. So when I was a kid, I had a bunch of them. And so my parents moved and they gave me a whole box of my old toys. And I thought about selling the whole box, or I thought about selling them individually. So I started selling them individually. And I got enough money to buy what I would consider to be a big fancy hi-fi setup. And so I bought a Moon by Sim Audio amplifier and a pair of CAF LS50s. And I hooked them up and I listened to them. And I was thoroughly underwhelmed. I thought this should sound better than this. So I had a friend at work who encouraged me to start a YouTube channel. And so I figured I'd start a YouTube channel and call it The Cheap Audio Man. And I called it The Cheap Audio Man because the Cheap Audio Dude was already taken. So I called it The Cheap Audio Man. And I did speaker comparisons, and that was my first video. And I bought more speakers and then compared more stuff, and then bought some amps, and I guess the rest is kind of history.
That actually is cool to hear.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How did you get your start?
I did start out on one of those like one of those Crosley,
Oh, turntable.
like one of those Crosley all-in-ones,
Yeah.
but that broke. So apparently at that time I was starting to be curious on what other options there were.
Right.
So I eventually got a Audio Technica
Yeah.
LP20,
Okay.
and then a pair of clips R. It was the R15 PM.
Okay. Yeah. 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 Powered. Yeah.
Yeah, and then eventually I have like the setup that I have now, but it definitely did take some time.
Yeah. What's your favorite record?
I would say definitely one that I've been playing a lot is it's the James Taylor, it's the greatest hits.
Okay. Cool. What type of music do you like?
It's just one of the things where it's all over the place.
Yeah, for sure. You like metal or rock and roll?
Yeah.
Yeah. Who's your favorite metal band?
um One of them would be us it would be a Slipknot.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I don't know if you can see it right
Yeah.
there. There's a Slipknot poster. I got to see them in concert. It was my last concert I went to. Very good, very fun. Yeah, if you get a chance to see them live, you should go check them out.
That I did have a encounter with their drummer.
Oh, really?
He did like some sort of like event here in LA.
Okay.
That he did play like a few Slipknot songs, and
Oh, no kidding.
he answered like a few questions that the fans had.
Yeah, that's cool, man. Yeah. Well, cool. What other equipment do you like? You've been messing with? I saw you did a shit audio. Was it a DAC review?
It was the Asgard.
Oh yeah, you like that?
Yeah.
Do you have what's your favorite headphones?
The only headphones that I use, it's a pair of by a company called 64 Audio.
Okay, I'm not
And
familiar with them.
they've been around for like, this year is their they've been around for 12 years.
Okay.
And I have a pair of their custom headphones, they're custom to my ears.
Oh, really? That's really cool. Well, cool.
The, Definitely one of the things I like about the channel is you're kind of geared towards more of like people be like kind of, I know audio gets like I won't say like a bad rap, but definitely there are companies that are more focused on like the people who are making like hundreds of thousands of dollars a year.
Right. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
definitely one thing I like about your channel is kind of like more people who are working like a 9 to 5
Yeah. Well,
job.
and that was me growing up, Mike. I didn't have a ton of money. So all the stuff I bought was used, and usually it was used more affordable gear, like realistic receivers. That was my first receiver, and I loved it. And I found one that was the same model as my first one, and I bought it on eBay. But I don't think that good sound should only be exclusive to folks that make a good living,
Yeah.
or folks that have the money to invest into expensive stuff. There's so many good products out there that are affordable, and I just wanted to talk about them and let more people know about them.
Yeah. One of the uh, pieces of gear that I have, it's a Cambridge uh, 5 it's a 551 preamp.
Okay.
And I think they don't make it anymore, but I think it retailed for about like $100.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
to me, it sounds good.
Yeah. Well, I think you have a really good headphone in the Asgard.
Yeah.
What type of DAC are you running into it?
I actually don't have a DAC.
Okay. What do you use for your source? The turntable?
Yeah. And,
Okay, cool.
and I do have a Cambridge it's the AXA 25.
Yeah, I have the same one. I did that review. Yeah.
And I also plug in to that a CD player.
Okay. Very cool. Um, and what speakers do you have going out of the Cambridge?
Uh, I got a pair of used clip speakers from the 80s. It's
Oh, very cool.
it's actually the clips heresy.
What? It's a heresy?
Yeah,
Wow. Are they big? Where do you
they're
have them at, in your room?
yeah,
Wow. That's a
that
big speaker, man.
yeah, but definitely with the Cambridge amp, I don't need lots of power
Right. Yeah.
because I tend to listen to more of like a low to medium volume.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and those clips are very efficient too.
Yeah,
So that's a good pairing.
yeah,
That's a really good pairing because that amp is as nice and warmer. So it's I bet it pairs up really well with those
yeah.
clips. Do you know what year they're from?
I think 84.
Okay. Do you know which heresy they are? Is it like the heresy 2?
I think I did a little bit of research, and I think Clips started to do like the revisions on that. I think in 85.
Okay. Very cool.
So I think they're like the part of like the first kind of like the first run.
Okay. That's cool. I know some folks offer some crossover upgrades
Yeah.
that you can do. Get in there and take a look at it. Um, well, that's very cool, man. What else did you want to talk about?
Kind of what has been some of your favorite gear that you've listened to?
Well, I just did a review on the Wharfdale Lintons, and that's a big speaker, three-way speaker, kind of like your Heresies.
Yeah.
And I really like that one a lot, but they're very expensive.
Yeah.
So they come in at 1,500 for the pair, and They have some stands, so about $1,800 all in. I like the Polk R100s. I've got them right here. You can't see them. I really like the JBLs, the Stage A130s, and they go on sale for around they go on sale for about 200, I think. The Sony SSCS5s, they're really good too, and they're actually on sale for $88 right now. They're really good speaker. For amplifiers on the more affordable side, I like the IEMA A07, the IEMA D03, and that's kind of an all-in-one type of amplifier. So it has a DAC in it, has a subwoofer output, has Bluetooth. So you can do a lot with it, and that's pretty affordable. I think about $170. For a streamer, I like the Weem Mini streamer, and that does AirPlay 2, Tidal Connect, Spotify Connect. It has an app, so you can bring in Amazon Music, Deezer. If you have any network music, you can pull that into. So it's a really cool device, and it goes for $100, but I think it's on sale right now on Amazon for $90. So it's a really cool device and can do a lot.
Yeah. So when you ever listen to music, kind of like what is the form that you listen to, no matter if it's vinyl or streaming, kind of what is kind of your kind of go-to?
Well, if I am reviewing gear, it's usually a playlist that I have on Amazon Music and Tidal. And so I'll stream that through whatever DAC I have set up and then into the amp and stuff. If I'm listening to vinyl, usually I'm listening for my own enjoyment.
Yeah.
And unless I'm like doing a cartridge review or a phono amp review or a turntable review, but obviously I don't have playlists, right? So I just have, records to play. So I usually try to listen to something that I'm really familiar with. So a lot of Metallica. This is Live in Moscow. It's a really good record. But I'll listen to the Black album from '91. So I know this record really, really well. I mean, how old are you?
27.
27. Okay. So when I was 16, well, actually, no, when I was 15 or 16, that record came out. So I've heard that record probably 1,000 times, man. So that's one that I use a lot because I'm just so familiar with it. And I know I love that record. So I play it through a lot of stuff.
So kind of speaking of Metallica, I actually, during Christmas, I got the And Justice for All album.
Ah, yeah. Hold on. I think I have that over here too. Yep. This one is a cool one because it came from Walmart and it's actually a really good recording of it, but the record is green. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
But this is a great record too. Very, very good. This is the record that kind of put them on the map in the mainstream because the track One started to get really heavy rotation on MTV. And then the Black album came out and it was just like, that was it. Metallica was just like everywhere and everybody knew about Metallica then.
I first heard about Metallica through the game. It was Guitar Hero.
Oh yeah.
And it was actually the track One.
Oh really? Yeah. They also had a track off of Death Magnetic on one of the Guitar Heroes. I can't remember what song it was, but that was on Guitar Hero. I've never played that game. Is it fun?
It definitely, it's been so long since I've played it.
Oh yeah.
But from what I remember, it definitely is one of those things that definitely got me into music more.
Mm-hmm.
And it exposed me to more artists.
Yeah. I never thought about it that way, but I can see that video game doing
Yeah.
that. Because I know, don't they combine a lot of classic rock, and they have a lot of different type of music on
Yeah.
there, right?
Yeah.
That's really cool. And it's interesting that a video game would bring like younger kids and introduce younger kids to maybe older music or
Yeah.
classic rock or whatever, or metal or something that they maybe not where they wouldn't listen to normally.
Yeah.
So that's pretty cool.
That- like this is something that I'm curious about, but do you ever listen to music more of like a on like a casual level, not like not being so, not trying to listen to every single detail of
Yeah, I
uh,
try. Um, it's, I've been super lucky to be able to grow the channel and to be able to get to listen to so many different items but yeah, man, I mean, that's what I love to do, is just kind of sit back and enjoy the music and not
yeah,
worry about the the finite details, because I'll listen to the same tracks over and over again in the same spots too. So a lot of times I won't even listen to the whole track if I'm comparing gear. I'll listen to 20 seconds or 30 seconds of it and then just keep going back and forth and going between, the different products that I'm listening to. So I for sure, and that's why I love vinyl so much,
yeah,
because normally when I'm listening to vinyl, I can't do that.
yeah,
Right. So I just get to listen to a whole side of a record. Um, so that's probably when I enjoy the music. Don't get me wrong, I enjoy everything. Like I enjoy testing everything. And it's so much fun. But vinyl is kind of like my happy place, my Zen place. And that's when I get to, I think, enjoy it a little bit more, even though I enjoy everything. But
yeah,
vinyl is just special for me because it's kind of like, it it kind of slows me down, and I get to listen to just tracks in their entirety, records in their entirety. It's really, I love vinyl. I
yeah.
love vinyl for that reason.
I actually would agree that it just definitely, after like a busy day, it just allows me to like step back and relax.
Yeah. Well, it's funny that you mentioned that because I really enjoy going to concerts.
Yeah,
And when I'm at a concert, especially if it's an artist that I really like, it's almost like this is going to be kind of sound kind of weird, but it's almost like a spiritual experience
yeah,
for me. Like I feel closer to, I don't know, the universe.
yeah,
I'm not worrying about anything. I'm just concentrating on the music, and everybody around me, for the most part, is doing the same thing, and being part of that community, really, that's at that concert. There's just something to be said about that, and
yeah,
I've always been weird about that, but music has always allowed me to kind of shut off my brain and just enjoy something and not be distracted.
yeah.
And so I can't, I love music. I love it, obviously.
Like for me, I grew up in the like the CD, and I grew up mostly with CDs, but also stuff like MP3s.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But with vinyl, I never got to experience what it was like.
Right.
So listening to music on vinyl allows me to have like a different experience.
Right. Yeah. And it's good that you got into vinyl, because vinyl back when I was growing up, because nobody, like, we all had cassettes. Now our parents had vinyl. And so like vinyl was like uncool back then, right? We all had cassettes, and then CDs hit, in the mid 80s, early 80s, but they started to become really commonplace in the mid to later 80s. And so then it was all about CDs. And so it wasn't until later that I got into vinyl, because I kind of had a bias against it, because that's what like my parents listened to, and that's what the old people listened to, was vinyl. But it's ironic, because now that I'm back into it, it's the format of music that I enjoy the best.
Yeah. It was this other YouTube channel that described why vinyl is coming back,
Mm-hmm.
and it's just one of those things that's just hard to explain.
Yeah. Well, and I think so, like, you remember like physical media. You
Yeah,
remember going to the store and buying that. I think I think folks that aren't too much younger than you maybe never had the experience of actually going to a store
yeah,
and buying something. And so like the physical interaction with the music was has been taken away, and there's a whole generation of folks that have never experienced it unless they're into vinyl, unless they're into CDs. And there's something about, having, like, this is art, right? You could hang this on your wall and it
yeah,
would look good, right? And I mean, just the bigness and the heft of it is that's that's what I like
yeah,
about it. And I listen to a lot of streaming music, and most of the time I'm listening to streaming music in one form or the other. But I, there's something to your point that is hard to put into words about putting a record on there, you know, taking your brush, making sure that you dust off the record, and like you're involved
yeah,
with the music. You're actively listening at that point because you're actively putting it on there, and you're not passively just skipping through tracks or something. So
yeah.
there's something really special about vinyl.
Yeah. But, like one of the ways that I listen to music through streaming is Pandora,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
and there are definitely times when I've gotten annoyed of Pandora just because of like a pause,
Yeah. Yeah.
and it just takes me out of the of a mood.
Right. Yeah. It's distracting.
Yeah,
Yeah. No, I agree with you. There's some streamers that they have gaps. So like if you're listening to a live record, like usually one track just kind of flows right into the other track.
yeah.
Or if you're listening on some streamers, they put a pause in there. And that completely throws me off. And I don't like the pauses either.
That like it does have benefits of being exposed to music,
For sure. Yeah.
but but it can definitely be annoying sometimes.
Yeah. No, I agree with you 100%. Because when I was a kid, you go to the store and you have to flip through a whole bunch of CDs. And the thing about it is number one, you didn't know if what you wanted was even going to be there. Number two, the only songs you usually knew were the ones that were played on the radio. So if you had 12 tracks on an album, you may only know two of them. And so it's a gamble, right? You're shelling out your money for something that, and maybe that, 80% of that record's not going to be any good. But with streaming, you get to kind of check it all out. And that's what I love about streaming. Streaming's like trying on shoes,
Yeah,
right? You get to try on all the tracks you want, and then you can go out and buy
yeah,
the record or buy the CD or something like that. And that's what I love about streaming is it's convenient, and you have access to more music than you could ever possibly want to listen to, I think. So I love them both.
yeah.
I don't think there's one is better than the other. I think they're different tools for different situations.
That so I've seen other people talk about this, but kind of like what are your thoughts on like vintage gear or new gear?
Yeah. Well, personally, I love vintage gear because there's something, to me, there's a bit of a different sound. And with vintage gear, almost all of the pieces that I have a loudness button. And so it, boosts the bass and the treble a little bit at lower volumes. And so I think there is a different kind of sound. And I know I'm painting with broad strokes here. Most of the vintage pieces that I have sound somewhat similar.
Yeah,
The only thing that's bad about vintage gear is one is always taking a risk when they buy it. especially something that's made in the 70s, right? Because we're like, that's 50 years old, right? And so I think it's awesome. And I think if people have the time and they understand that it's a risk, then
Yeah.
I think everybody should, run out and get some get some vintage gear.
Yeah.
Um, but there's no warranty. There's no guarantee that it's going to work. There's no guarantee that's going to work for a long time. But I like the styling a lot. I think it's very unique, and I think more emphasis was put on how a piece looked, because and back then receivers were more commonplace than they are
Yeah.
now, where everybody that I knew, every friend of mine, their parents all had component stereo systems, because radio was so huge back then, right? Radio was almost always the thing, and turntables, even 8 tracks. But everybody that I knew had their folks had generally a receiver, and then they would have a turntable and maybe an 8 track, and sometimes a cassette deck, later on. But back then it was part of the living room, right? So the way that they would design stuff, it would have to look good in somebody's living room. And I think that comes through with a lot of the vintage gear
Yeah.
on how it looks. It just looks good, right? Looks
Yeah.
really nice. Looks like a piece of furniture,
Yeah.
Even back then, I mean, they would have you ever seen like a console turntable record player? So it looks kind of like a shelf. It's a piece of furniture, literally. And the top would go up, the record would go on, and the bottom they'd have speakers. And it was huge.
I think I've seen something similar to that. I think something like that was in the show Stranger Things.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
it takes place in like the 80s.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think they had something
That's
like very
exactly
similar.
when I grew up, brother. It was the 80s. Like I was that age in the 80s. Yeah. Yeah, but console your stuff was a part of the living room, so it had to look good back then.
Like with vintage, even though it does have its risk,
Mm-hmm.
it definitely that like that time of gear definitely has its own like charm.
I couldn't agree with you more. I think it has a sweeter sound. I don't think people were as concerned about the last minute details. The chords were thin, there was no balanced inputs on that stuff. People enjoyed the music, and they weren't as I don't think they were as concerned about the gear as they are now,
Yeah.
and more concerned about the music.
Yeah.
And I it has a special place in my heart for sure. And what's interesting is some of the stuff that I really enjoy now reminds me of vintage gear.
Yeah.
Like there's a company called Kitika or Akatika, and they make preamp and amplifier kits and some other things. But the styling is kind of similar to some of the stuff in the early 80s. And the sound is actually, I think, reminiscent of some other vintage gear. So that's my kind of reference system.
Yeah. I've never really understood why some people in like the audio world are very I would say analytical about on how gear is measured.
Mm-hmm.
For me personally, as long as it sounds good, it's worth it.
Yeah. And you're the most important person.
Yeah.
Like what we enjoy is what we should enjoy.
Yeah.
And I think in a subjective hobby, I understand that there's science and there's specific levels of signal to noise ratio, or other aspects that can be measured that are important. I think that's a starting point for
Yeah.
a lot of things. But you can also look at Nelson Pass, who is very well regarded in the industry, and some of his products are very expensive and enjoyed by many. Those are not cheap products.
Yeah.
And I don't think anybody would argue that Nelson Pass is a bad designer. And many of his products have a lot of second order harmonics that wouldn't particularly measure well, but they sure sound good.
Yeah.
Tube amps is another example of a product that doesn't particularly measure well, but they're loved. I mean, absolutely loved by so many.
Yeah.
And so, well, I think measurements are a good thing, and they're a great way to measure certain aspects. Um, I think that I think anybody that says a product needs to be this way or it's not good is wrong.
Yeah.
I think there is truth in everything. I think there's truth in measurements, and I think there's truth in subjectivity. But
Yeah.
to try to put a science on a hobby that is in its essence and course subjective, I think is a fool's errand. I just don't think that makes any sense. It's like trying to design an algorithm that says what art looks good,
Yeah.
right? I mean, how do you say that? Because music is art and it moves everyone differently. A painting, an oil painting, some might consider it to be hideous, while another person would consider it to be, you know, earth shattering or changing their lives.
Yeah.
And who is to say that they are right and they are wrong?
Yeah.
So I think it's great that different designers have different design paradigms and methods to the way that they do it, because it'd be pretty boring if everything sounded the same, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That,
So anyway, you got me all excited, Mike, on that one. Sorry.
that, definitely with that, I know. So there are people that are very like strong about that.
Mm-hmm.
That like everything's gonna be like a certain way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I just don't think it should be that way.
Yeah.
I think there's room for everybody.
Yeah.
And I think there's room for perfectly measuring amplifiers or DACs or speakers. And I think there's room for a speaker that maybe doesn't even have a crossover and maybe has, a frequency response that is, delineates from being a completely neutral speaker. I think if people enjoy it, I'll put it to you this way. If something is popular and it sells, then that's the right way to design it. And so there's amplifiers that measure perfectly and they sell well.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that's the right way to design it. There's amplifiers like tube amps that measure horribly, but people buy them. So really the only metric that we can use to determine what is the right way to design an amplifier or a speaker is how many are sold and how many people enjoy them. And people enjoy amplifiers of all different flavors. So that must mean all those designers are right. They're right in how they're doing it. Because if they weren't right, they wouldn't sell and nobody would know about them.
Like that definitely does make sense, because like with I think for me personally, it does come down to the person listening, kind of like what mood they're in,
Mm-hmm.
and just like kind of it also may depend on like the gear that they have.
Mm-hmm.
But as long as it sounds good, that
It's all that matters, right? We listen to music, not the gear.
yeah.
The gear is a tool to help us enjoy music, right? So I know that in this hobby, I think there's a lot of emphasis put on the gear, and rightly so. It's fun. It's fun to look and to research new products and understand what's out there. But at the end of the day, it should be about the music
Yeah.
and the enjoyment and the experience. And if you can have a great experience on a $200 system, then that's awesome.
Yeah.
And if you have a $20,000 system and you enjoy it, then that's awesome too. It's about the music, man.
Yeah.
About the vinyl, brother.
Yeah. Yeah. So like the cartridge that I have, it's a Orderfon 2M Red,
Yeah, yeah, I have that cartridge too.
and it's not like the most expensive.
I don't know where mine is at, brother.
Yeah.
Oh, I don't see it. I've got a, oh, I know where it's at. I do. So I don't have it anymore because I changed the stylus out. So this is the Orderfon 2M Red stylus.
Yeah.
I took it off and I put the Orderfon or 2M Blue stylus on my turntable. So I have a half of a Orderfon 2M Red. Yeah.
Like, even though I know it's not the most expensive stylus, but from like it sounds good.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. That's a decent cartridge.
Yeah.
It's pretty revealing. So it's got detail, a little bit forward in the vocals and upper mid range. But again, if that stylus wasn't good, it wouldn't sell.
Yeah.
And that cartridge is on a lot of record players.
Yeah.
So I think to say that that's not a good cartridge is short-sighted.
Yeah.
Now, personally, I do prefer the Orderfon 2M Blue, but it's more expensive.
Yeah.
I also like, and you might like this one. This is the Nagaoka
Yeah.
MP110. I don't know if you know this one or not.
That I actually am. That is one that I do know, but never tried.
Yeah, it's a lot smoother,
Yeah.
a little bit warmer. It's going to be a lot warmer than the 2M Red. Or it's going to sound a lot different than the 2M Red. But it's a different sound. So I get to enjoy music a different way. The same record, but played through different, cartridge sounds different. And I like that.
So I think that wraps up.
All right, man. Well, I appreciate you having me on, Mike. This was a lot of fun.
Yeah. I definitely did have fun during this whole thing.
Good. Well, good, man. Well, let me know when you post it, and I'll share it out on my channel as well.
Yeah. Thanks.
You bet, Mike. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye, buddy.